I first saw Virginia Hammon on an Alliance for Just Money online coffee house. The double meaning of just money intrigued me. Stripped of the scheming that often emerges around wealth, money is just money. In the other perspective, is it fair? Is our monetary system just? Does it offer equal opportunity to those using it? Money is the blood of society. In our individual bodies, our gut gives us resources, our lungs provide us with air, our brains give us direction, our muscles give us motion, and the blood circulates between all these parts to make us an integral being. In society, some people make things, other people educate, other people entertain, some people grow food, and money circulates through the banks to all these different parts and makes us an integral society. If every time blood passed through your heart, you had to pay a fee, it would be expensive to live. Every time money passes through the banks, we have to pay a fee, and it's expensive to live. Now, as long as the planet offered more resources to make up this extra expense, we were more or less okay with that. But now that the planet's resources are tapped, we're running into some serious problems. Virginia has a varied background. In addition to public presentations and producing books and videos on how we can pay for a better world, she is a mother of four, a Montessori educator, a promoter of democracy, and she also has an artistic side. So from the right and the left brain, she has a perspective to bring to this topic of money that I think we'll all enjoy. So Virginia, over to you.
Thank you for that great introduction. I have allergies, and it's, so what I've done is recorded this because my voice won't make it through the whole hour, but I'm here.
Money matters. A fulcrum for change. Money matters. I have some new technology to help us out today, a time machine. I've set the date. Take a deep breath. It's barely dawn on a day in early June, 1802. Early light sparkles on the dry grasses on the slopes of the volcanic mountain Chimborazo. You're wearing your leather boots, shirt, sweater, and wool jacket. Maybe you packed a stiff and heavy wax-soaked waterproof coat. You've packed up instruments to measure distance, temperature, take specimens, draw detailed images. It snowed during the night and the air is cold. The mountain is shrouded in fog. Every now and then the fog lifts and you get a tantalizing glimpse of the peak. It is going to be a long day climbing to the summit at 21,000 feet. A team of 4 of you and a couple porters start out. Beginning your ascent, you cross the grassy plains and slopes. Every few hundred feet, you stop to take out and use your instruments. You make full notes in your diary. The rocks get steeper, and when you reach 13,500 feet, you leave the portage animals behind. At 15,600 feet, your porters refuse to go on. You and your 3 friends divide up the heavy instruments and continue. Your leather boots are shredded by the sharp rocks and jagged ice. It gets colder and colder. To reach the summit, you crawl on all 4s along a high ridge that narrows to a dangerous 2 inches with steep cliffs falling away to your left and right. Cold is numbing your hands and feet. You're nauseous and dizzy with altitude sickness, eyes bloodshot and gums bleeding. You suffer constant vertigo. Alexander von Humboldt makes this difficult and extraordinary journey today and traveled thousands of similar miles on several continents. He meticulously records his observations in difficult and dangerous circumstances. He develops a strong sense of the natural world as a unified whole that is animated by interactive forces. His observations inform his belief in human-induced climate change and the problems it is bringing. Von Humboldt observes and popularizes this concept of interconnectedness in the natural world and the need for humans to avoid damaging ecosystems with industrial practices. That was then. Now, back to 2022. 220 years have passed since Humboldt's astounding adventures brought him global fame, and his ideas were broadly admired and discussed. Today, we have better gear and instruments, but the view, instead of being the same, has sadly deteriorated. We have not put his insights, his concerns, or his advice into practice. I am humbled speaking to this impressive group. Having watched many of the previous presentations, I am grateful for the detailed, in-depth, broad understandings of what is happening and the potential solutions to protect all life on the planet. And I'm grateful for those of you who have spent lifetimes dedicated to conservation, preservation, regeneration of the natural world and our communities. For many of us in the environmental and social justice movements, it feels like we've been pushing a Sisyphean rock up a hill. Progress is made, and then it feels like we're back at the beginning of our efforts. We succeed on one issue, and then like whack-a-mole or like the Hydra, two more problems appear. We struggle to make enough change to save ourselves and the planet. When we think about potential futures for our children and grandchildren, it can be depressing. Many of us are afraid for the future. We're fearful, sad, angry, discouraged, and depressed. We're hungry for a powerful path to accomplish our goals. I love Thomas Homer Dixon's book on Commanding Hope, which I was inspired to read by your group. As he eloquently explains, we have to be real about the dangers. And yes, we must and can have hope that a better, sustainable world is possible. We ask, is there a fulcrum that will make light work of removing the obstacles to our success? Is there a fulcrum that can give us the greatest leverage and swiftest action toward a sustainable, healthy, and prosperous life on planet Earth? What is the weight holding us in place? What is sabotaging our progress toward a better world? What strategy would give us the greatest leverage to lift this weight? To understand the weighty obstacle crushing our hopes and dreams, we must take another journey back in time to a seminal event. It's July 27th, 1694. An ordinary summer day in London, cloudy, a bit of a drizzle. These are tumultuous times. It's only been 5 years since the glorious revolution that unseated the Catholic James II and put Protestant William III and Mary II on the throne of England, Ireland, and Scotland. Before the coronation, the Bill of Rights was signed, a landmark act in the constitutional law of England that set out some basic civil rights and established Parliament's supremacy over the crown. This was important for many reasons, not least because it shifted the power, privilege, and responsibility over the nation's finances from the crown to Parliament. 4 years ago, in 1690, the English were defeated by the French Navy at the Battle of Beachy Head. Rumors are that the French are planning to attack Holland next. The English Navy must be rebuilt and increased in size if England is to reign supreme. New to the throne, King William and Queen Mary have a reputation and power to establish, and they need money to do it. Parliament has voted to spend £5 million on an expanded army and navy, but both the Crown and Parliament are short funds and a financial crisis is looming. Charles Montague, recently appointed a Chancellor of the Exchequer, that's the Chief Executive Officer of the King's Treasury, has patched together some bold expedients for raising funds. One of them is to be chartered today, a privately owned Bank of England. Centuries, even millennia of experiments and evolution in money, banking, and finance led up to this event. A fascinating history for another time. A few weeks earlier, Parliament passed a bill allowing a special bank to form upon conscription of £1.2 million. The conscription has been satisfied. 1,500 people have subscribed to the founding of the new Bank of England, raising $300,000 in cash of the $1.2 million committed in subscriptions. King William and Queen Mary were first to sign with a subscription for stock worth £10,000 and a down payment of $2,500, with the rest an IOU, as most others have done. Operations are ready to begin, and the Crown will be at the head of the line to benefit from the bank's issuance of debt credit money, a loan for $1.2 million at 8% interest, plus a £4,000 annual fee, which curiously is a lower rate than the goldsmiths have been charging the Crown for loans. Today, you've donned your fashionably bigwig and heels, denoting your status as one of the bigwigs, an important person at court. You spend your morning at the coffee house with your financier friends. Bankers and merchants are excited about this afternoon's event. This new bank will significantly increase the amount of debt credit available for business investment and growth, and profits will follow for the early adopters and well-connected. You are invited to Mercer's Hall for the formal signing of the Charter of the Bank of England, and it's the talk of financial circles. Mercer's Hall is the home of the Fabric Merchants Guild, incorporated in 1394. A curious coincidence not lost on this fabric-buying money reformer quilter. This hall is a lovely new building, rebuilt 20 years ago after the Great Fire of London destroyed the original in 1666. It's quite splendid. The bank is renting the premises for the next 6 months for its first headquarters. Merchants, bankers, and representatives of the Crown are here today to sign a charter for the Bank of England. Though you cannot imagine the global consequences, this day in 1694 is the formal beginning of a monetary and financial revolution that will change the world. This new Bank of England implements methods developed over centuries, methods brought to an exemplary standard of practice by the government-owned Bank of Amsterdam in the early 1600s, in a system designed for society-wide benefit. But the Bank of England establishes in law a radical new combination of elements. Let's step out of time for a moment to consider the elements of any money system so that we can better evaluate options and historical precedents. We'll be quick. We want to be on the same page with our definitions. So, what is money and what is a money system? Even the Bank of England was fuzzy in their descriptions about how money is created. When the money reform group Positive Money UK asked them about it about 10 years ago. So Positive Money helped push a bill through Parliament requiring the bank to study the question of who creates the money supply and how do they do it, and to report on their findings. In 2014, they did so and reported that, quote, the majority of money in the modern economy is created by commercial banks making loans. This is from Money Creation in the Modern Economy, Bank of England Quarterly Bulletin, 2014, Quarter 1. So if it took the Bank of England until 2014 to be clear in their public communications about what the banking system is doing, it's important we review it because there is lots of misunderstanding and misinformation around and about. Money is a human invention, a social technology based on agreement and trust and used to represent value in the exchange of goods and services. This isn't a new realization or definition, though it's been obscured for centuries. Over 2,000 years ago, Aristotle noted that, quote, money exists not by nature, but by law. Every money system has some basic characteristics: community-wide agreement to use the money, a token or tokens, some way to authenticate and guarantee trustworthiness, a way to add and subtract from the supply, and a steady declining or increasing value built into the system. And what does money do? Money serves as a medium of exchange. It's a tool. Sometimes it's tangible, sometimes virtual. You may find it helpful to think of money as a kind of language. Language facilitates an exchange of ideas, some good and helpful, some horrible and destructive. And language expressions can come in multiple forms. Think conversation, books, the internet. Money serves as a unit of account to measure value. Just as words are not hard and sharp conveyors of meaning, we all get tangled in a mixed connotations now and then. Money is not a hard and sharp unit of value. It's a bit like having a ruler that can be stretched or shrunk. But like words, it is serviceable and serves to express a context for value, fairness, and reciprocity. Evaluating fairness and reciprocity is part of human nature. If you haven't seen the experiment with the monkeys and the cucumber or grape, it's worth a search. What is fair is in our DNA, and money serves as a measure of fair. The development of money has roots in this aspect of our natures. Money serves as a store of value over time and distance. Money makes it possible to sell something one day in one place, and with the income, buy something somewhere else on another day. Today, at the speed of light, we can make exchanges with people all over the planet because we have a money system. Storing value between exchanges makes money a form of wealth. But as some say, you can't eat money, so it's definitely not tangible wealth. However, like a book that stores a wealth of ideas that can transform lives, money stores value. So it is a kind of wealth that is intangible and potential and transitory. Whether or not money is real wealth was a hot topic of debate from the 17th to 20th centuries, partly because the use of commodities for tokens obscured the nature of money and money systems. For example, coins survive well through time, whereas account books disintegrate and vanish, warping the historical record. Today, in a partially digital landscape, we are less likely to ask whether tangible, deteriorating according to the laws of thermodynamics, things are the only form of wealth. Like a common language, money is a virtual tool at the foundation of culture. The values and processes of a given money system are the roots, the soil. Money is a formative influence on economic and societal developments. The values inherent in a money system will seep into all aspects of a culture. A money system can support democratic, humanitarian, partnership values, or a money system can support authoritarian, profit-centered, dominator values, or a combination. We defined what money does and its basic characteristics. Here are the key characteristics and most important questions to ask of any kind of money system. Who creates the money supply? How is the money supply created? And how is money first introduced into the economy? These characteristics can happen in different ways and take different forms. The particular combination of characteristics establishes a money system. Money systems and kinds of money are often defined by one of their characteristics, which can lead to some confusion. For example, when people talk about returning to gold money, defining the system by the token, one must clarify whether this is gold coins or a fractional reserve system with gold reserves. And by reserves, do they mean partial or 100%? And to finish up our review, here's what a money system is not. It's not the same as an economic system. Money is an important foundation and often ignored component of economics, determining or heavily influencing economic outcomes. But a particular kind of money system could serve in a capitalist or communist economy, and has. It's worth noting that up until very recently, most economists ignored the money system and considered it a neutral factor. The money system is not the same as fiscal policy. Fiscal policy is about what we should spend money on and when. The flows of money in the system. Who and how much should we tax? Who and how money is created has a determining influence on fiscal policy, but it's not the same thing. I hope I've made the point that there are many kinds of money systems and given you a frame to evaluate any and all system options. Now that we're clear about what we mean by money and a money system, let's step back in time again. What was the money system chosen and enshrined in law on this July day in 1694 by the English Parliament? A system that would change the world profoundly. This agreement is between the English Parliament, Crown, and private bankers and their investors. The new privately owned Bank of England is given the power to create the national money supply by making loans, and it will collect interest on those loans. This will be debt credit money. The bankers will determine the first use of this new money based on profitability for the banks and their investors. Money is removed from the supply when a loan is repaid. The government will guarantee this new money with the full faith and credit of the nation in exchange for the loans needed to build the military, political, economic, and social force to build the empire they desire. This new system immediately raises some eyebrows. In 1696, the writer of a broadsheet entitled "The Mint and the Exchequer United" writes, "They give their cashiers notes for all sums, ad infinitum, which neither charge the fund nor the proprietors," which seems to be a credit beyond the intention of the Act of Parliament and never practiced before by any corporation. To give any notes but under their seal is almost a fraud on the subject. Now, step back into the time machine to return to the present. Over centuries, there have been plenty of experiments with variations of one kind or another in each of the characteristics of money. There has been maneuvering for power between monarchs, governments, bankers, big bankers, and little bankers, and central banks. Tokens have changed. Reserve requirements rose, fell, vanished, and shifted to equity requirements. Enormously complicated financial instruments and elaborate accounting rules have obscured the basic operations. There are a lot of great stories. I'm working on putting them into video vignettes. With minor variations, though, this basic framework enshrined in British law in 1694 is a system that has spread via empire and now dominates the globe, with even today mostly non-essential variations. Back to 2022. As that journalist noted in 1696, and the Bank of England confirmed in 2014, the banks are creating a nearly unlimited number of banknotes with only the stamp of their seal, without taking money from their hard assets nor from their shareholders. How do they do that? Well, let's return to the 21st century and take a look at how this system creates money. First, I must apologize that my charts and numbers are nearly all of the US system. I'm not familiar with where to go to get readily downloadable charts on Canada. The charts that I have seen about Canada appear to echo the results of the US. However, your central bank is not privately owned, so I'm curious about any other differences in our systems and apologize for the necessary assumption that US facts are echoed by Canada and that your story is similar to ours. From what I know, it is basically the same system with better oversight, better laws to mitigate inequities and craziness, and elements of common sense. From an American perspective, that's just typically Canadian. So, on to Main Street. First, it's important to recognize that money supplies grow exponentially today. Here's the growth in the Canadian M2 money supply. The supply doubled between 1996 and 2022. Doubling in 26 years suggests an average growth rate of about 3%. Here's a graph of the US money supply from 1960 to the present. Note that between February 2021 and February 2022, the supply grew by 2.2 trillion. Both Canada and the US show increasing money supplies. So who should decide where this new money goes first? Should it go to the financial players or for the common good? It is a choice built into a money system. To learn how the system works, let's start on Main Street, where you and I, our businesses, and the businesses we frequent keep track of our money. Businesses or individuals keep track of their money in the same way. Let's say you have $1,000 in cash. In your records, in the asset column, you have cash, $1,000. You have no liabilities, so your net or equity is $1,000. In traditional business accounting, your net equity sits on the liability side because the assets belong to the shareholders or owners, so they're technically a liability of the business to the owners. Now, let's say you loan your friend Max the $1,000. You take your $1,000 and give it to Max. That removes the cash asset. Then Max gives you his IOU for $1,000, and that goes in your assets. You exchanged your $1,000 cash asset for a $1,000 IOU asset. The net of your balance sheet did not change. You just changed the kind of asset you have. And the amount of money in the economy did not change. You lent Max existing money in your possession. So that same $1,000 is in the economy, whether it's in your hands or Max's. How is this accounting different for commercial banks that create our money supply? Let's look at the balance sheet of a bank that starts out with the same $1,000 as you did. Of course, banks have many more zeros. Here is a bank in the same financial position that you were before you made a loan. This bank has $1,000 cash and no liabilities, so a net or equity of $1,000. Well, let's see what happens when the bank makes a loan. A bank does not need to use the $1,000 in existing money in its possession to loan Max $1,000. A bank takes Max's IOU and books it as a new asset. Then it puts $1,000 worth of new bank money on the liability side of the bank's ledger in Max's deposit account. All deposit accounts are on the liability side of banks' ledgers because deposits are the bank's own IOUs, representing the bank's commitment to assure that Max can withdraw and spend those $1,000. Of course, Max could take his money in cash or deposit it in another bank or spend it. As money circulates, the banks function as a collective whole. It takes longer to explain what is happening technically, but fundamentally and systemically, this is it, all over the world. Notice the net or equity of the bank remains the same. It's still $1,000. However, their balance sheet has lengthened. Banks account assets and liabilities grow line by line as they create money. Instead of one entry in assets, there are two entries, and assets have doubled to $2,000. Liabilities have increased from nothing to $1,000. The money supply has grown. In this case, it has doubled from $1,000 in the bank's hands to $2,000 in the bank and Max's hands. Roughly 90% of the money that we use today is created in this way. A smaller portion of this money creation is done by the central bank as it functions as banker to the banks. In the same accounting manner that a commercial bank uses to create money in making a loan to you, the central bank creates money as it makes loans to its member banks. These central bank loans to members play a role in maintaining adequate liquidity for the banks as they transfer funds between each other and make investments. But the loans from the central bank are not needed by the commercial banks for their loans to the public. However, the interest rate that the central bank charges its member banks will influence what the commercial banks charge each other and their borrowers. Here is a chart of the U.S. central bank's assets from 2003 to mid-2022. And here's the graph of liabilities, which looks nearly identical, demonstrating further how banks accounting generally adds an IOU asset at the same time that it adds a deposit liability. Central bank equity is 1 to 2%, so not of much relevance. And if you're wondering what might be causing inflation, this image might suggest a strong possibility. And here's the graph of liabilities, which looks, we can look at either bank assets or liabilities to get an idea of the changes over time. Now that you understand how a bank or central bank's balance sheet grows, You know how much money this central bank created by making loans and accepting various forms of IOUs from their member banks. To return to the commercial banks that create most of the money supply, so that you can get a sense of what this power and privilege to create the money supply looks like, here is a very abbreviated look at Jpmorgan Chase's 2021 financial report. Jpmorgan Chase is the largest bank in the United States and the second largest bank in the world, behind the Industrial and Commercial Bank of China. Jpmorgan Chase has total assets of $3,744 billion, or 3.7 trillion, liabilities of $3,449 billion, or 3.4 trillion, giving them a net equity of just $294 billion. That reported net equity includes preferred stock, goodwill, and other intangible assets. Removing the intangible assets, is their goodwill really worth billions? Here's another way to look at that summary. With $211 billion in hard assets, the bank is able to generate a net income of $48 billion. The return on tangible common equity is 23%. How many businesses on Main Street do you know that can bring in a 23% annual return on equity? The power to create the national money supply and collect interest on it is a privilege no other business has. It's easy to see why the financial sector is able to dominate and control the economy. When we look at the total money supply created and consider that it was created as loans bearing interest, the transfer of wealth is staggering. The commercial bank deposit portion of the US money supply was $19.5 trillion in April 2022. This is money created by bank lending. Someone, somewhere, borrowed this money and is paying interest on this debt. If we estimate an average interest rate of 5%, that would mean that banks and debt investors are collecting $975 billion in interest payments in 1 year. This is an enormous and unnecessary burden on the productive economy. Imagine what that $975 billion could pay for in improvements to the commons. So, where did all the money go? Did it trickle down from investment in new business and productivity and land in the pockets of US citizens? Did the household income rise? Well, no. In each of the periods when the money supply and central bank's balance sheet increased substantially, the income of households went down. So where did all the new money go? Well, here are the corporate profits over this time frame. Corporations definitely took hits with each depression, but they bounced right back up. So some of the money went into the pockets of those who hold shares in corporations. Now let's consider the exponential growth of one segment of the corporate sector, the financial sector. Here are the total financial assets of the domestic financial sectors over the past 70 years. This graph is a different time scale than the previous. Notice the exponential curve of the growth in the financial sector's assets. This system of privately created debt credit money is essentially, intrinsically, systemically, continuously a wealth transfer operation. Wealth is transferred from the many to the few. As economist John Kenneth Galbraith noted nearly 50 years ago, quote, "The process by which banks create money is so simple that the mind is repelled. Where something so important is involved, a deeper mystery seems only decent." In any money system, we want people to be able to excel and do well. But the top 1% of people cannot own 40% of the wealth in any nation and take home 20% of all annual income unless there is a system to support this wealth transfer. That's what our money system today does all over the world. US Supreme Court Justice Louis D. Brandeis said, "We can have democracy in this country, or we can have great wealth concentrated in the hands of a few, but we cannot have both." And described to Marshall McLuhan, quote, money is among the secrets which are kept by disbelief. I hope I'm making it clear enough that you're all believers. What does the evidence say about the primary outcomes of a privately created wealth transfer debt credit money system? The evidence says the primary outcomes of this money system choice are exponential growth in the money supply, in both private and public debt, and in wealth concentration. So here again is the graph of the US money supply. We can look back and compare it to the graph of growth in the assets of the financial sector. The slope should look familiar. The charts of money supply growth that I found on the Fed's website only go back to the 1960s. I haven't found charts that go back to the establishment of the Federal Reserve System in 1913, the US version of the Bank of England. However, the data's there, and I reviewed all their financial reports back to 1913, created a spreadsheet, and found an average of about 7.3% growth per annum in the reported money supply. If you chart the rise from 1913 to the present, with the average growth of 7.3%, this is what it looks like. The curve smooths out and details are lost, but it is a useful overview. And for Claire, here's one of my quilts. I've made a collection of about 50 quilts illustrating various aspects of the money question. This one is called Sugar Rush to Oblivion. It shows the average rate of growth of the US money supply with some fabric choice commentary. Why does our current money system have to grow the supply exponentially? Well, all money supplies must grow to accommodate increases in population and productivity. For example, our grandparents didn't need to budget for a fancy phone and international telecommunication service. But in addition to this basic growth, when banks create money by making loans, they only create the amount of the principal. The borrower must increase his income enough or grow his income or business to draw the money out of the general economy supply to make the interest payment. When you multiply the need to grow and make more money to pay back interest by a majority of people and businesses, this system exerts a pressure and imperative for growth and for profits. This establishes a growth imperative in the whole economy. It also pushed profit making into the top priority slot. The supply also has to grow to support central bankers' goals of maintaining a slowly deteriorating value of the dollar, otherwise known as inflation. When money is going to be worth less, it puts pressure on everyone to spend now. This keeps money circulating, increases economic output and borrowing, which of course is needed in order to keep the money supply increasing. In the US, the Fed, our privately owned central bank, sets a goal of 2% annual inflation, as do most central banks in a debt money system. And what is the result? Here is the purchasing power of the US dollar since we passed the Federal Reserve Act in 1913. Notice if you smoothed out the big drop in the early 1900s, you've got the general shape of that same exponential curve. It's simply reversed. So in summary, the money supply grows to match increased population and productivity, to create enough money for principal and interest, and to grow more than needed. So the value of the money deteriorates slowly, exerting pressure to spend now, which increases the need to borrow as the system demands. And something worth considering. On the chart of average money supply growth, notice that up to about 1970, the chart is relatively flat. That annual increase of 7.3% doesn't mean so much when the supply is small. As the supply increases, it compounds. And still, at the same rate of increase, the chart begins to head up much more sharply. Hold the image of an exponential curve, the slow, almost flat beginning, the gentle swing upward, then the nearly vertical line off the chart. At first, exponential growth appears deceptively slow, manageable, and even something to celebrate, until it's not. When we look at social and economic changes over the past century, keep that curve in mind when searching for correlation and causation. Many people who advocate for returning to a money system that links money to, quote, anything real, a commodity or commodity-based money, they point to 1971, when President Nixon took the US off the gold standard. They say, look at this pivotal point, concluding there is causation present. It is much more likely that changes made in these years were to accommodate the growth imperative, the money system dog wagging the economic tail. The next primary outcome and core problem of this money system is exponentially increasing debt. In this money system, having a supply of money means having debt. Of course, every debt has a corresponding credit, and some people call this kind of money credit money, but they're two sides of the same coin. So let's look at the growth of debt. Here's the US federal government debt from the 1960s to the present. Notice the increase in the debt roughly follows the curve of the money supply. Here is the US debt of the financial sector. You can see that they are highly leveraged and that the 2008 depression caused an adjustment in their debt levels that now return to its previous height. And here is the debt of the non-financial sectors of the economy from the 1960s to the present. Again, notice the curve. One important point about debt, there's nothing wrong with debt in itself. It can be extraordinarily useful for people seeking to make major purchases or for businesses making investments. However, this could all still happen with a money system that uncouples debt from money creation. Here's a chart comparing the US money supply today to the US debt of households, businesses, and government. Notice that the debt is many times the money supply. This is because debt can stack or nest. The bank loans me $1,000, creating $1,000 in the money supply. I loan $500 of it to you. Now we have $1,500 in debt, but only the $1,000 in the money supply. This chart, unfortunately, leaves out the financial sector debt, which is a maze of interconnecting debt on debt on debt, some creating new money, some not. So why does the debt grow? Simple answer. Since the money supply is created as debt, debt must also increase exponentially. This means that there must be more borrowers. It means the need to borrow must be increased. The things we borrow to buy must increase. People who cannot pay for basic living expenses must increase. More and more borrowers must be found or created. For debt to increase, people must spend more and spend more money than they have. What do you think this does to society's value base? The third important outcome or consequence of a privately created debt money system, and critically important for the maintenance of any kind of just government and democratic practice, is that it is a wealth transfer. It increases the concentration of wealth in fewer and fewer hands. Economic inequality increases, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, and the middle class shrinks. This graph is a bit jagged with ups and downs, but smooth it out and it's the same exponential curve. The share of the national income going to the top 10% has been going up steadily and exponentially. The wealthiest 10% of households today control 70% of all the wealth. How much greater does the shift need to be before there is an inevitable violent revolt? Here's another way to look at who owns the wealth. This chart by Edward N. Wolfe at NYU shows the percentages of national wealth on top and the percent of the population that owns this wealth. You can see the squeeze on the middle class. Why does this inequality grow? Wealth transfers from borrowers to lenders. When money is created as debt by private banks who will collect interest on this debt, that systemically transfers money from borrowers to lenders, from the general public to the financial sector, from those who owe to those who own. Then wealth brings political power, and political power shifts the laws to further favor the wealthy. Additionally, banks generally demand some kind of asset collateral to make significant loans. This creates a boom and bust cycle that also benefits the wealthy few who can buy up properties on the downturn and sell at the next peak. As you can see from the earlier graphs of household and corporate income, households suffer most and take the longest to recover in these boom and bust cycles. I was tempted to go into some of the secondary consequences for you today, but this audience could write books, and some have, about the state of the world in quite specific terms. My thesis is that nearly every issue we face has a root in the money system. Who has access to money and decides how it is used? The role of debt and wealth transfer, the impact of a society that must make profit its highest priority, and that glorifies financial speculation, perpetual war. A debt-based and speculative mentality that asks, how much debt can we get away with now? What's the carrying cost in the short term? False scarcity that demands our government borrow, pay massive amounts of interest, and practice austerity when times are tough, when we need money the most. And most importantly, the demand for continuous exponential growth on a finite planet. We asked at the beginning, what is the blight, the obstacle weighing down and sometimes blocking the implementation of all our good ideas for a better world? I hope I've shown that the specific money system that we use today is a substantial part of this dark weight, which we have struggled against in our quest to make a better world. So is there an alternative? Is there a different money system that could serve as a fulcrum for leveraging our efforts to best advantage? Could a change in our money system leverage our energy and make change happen faster? Yes, certainly. Here's a set of features of a desirable money system prepared by a study group of the Athens, Ohio League of Women Voters that will be presented for consideration at the League's National Convention in June, in 2 weeks, an effort in which I participated. A first feature, the money system will provide a convenient medium of exchange with ease of use for all. We do this pretty well today. The money system will assure a steady value of money, providing economic stability, free from economy-wide inflation or deflation, regardless of increases or decreases in the productive output of the economy. With regard to money creation, the money system will allow for increases or decreases in the money supply as needed by the economy in ways such that the economy is stable, eliminating extremes of economy-wide booms and busts, including recessions and depressions. No one is systemically privileged in the money creation process. Money creation is fair and equitable and benefits all, not primarily a subset of the population. The nation is able to spend what is needed to meet human needs and address climate change, limited only by the available resources and productive capacity of the economy. The creation of the nation's money is not used for private profit-making or gain. The benefits of the first use of money go for the common good. The creation of the national money supply does not require increasing debt. The creation of money can accommodate a growth, slow growth, degrowth, or no growth economy. The national system of money connects to the global and other national systems in a way that privileges no nation, allows the people of all nations to benefit from the first use of their national money, and supports a sustainable future for all. What would you add or subtract? I think I'd add that the system must respect privacy and have built-in protections for individual autonomy. From my study, there is one system that stands out in best meeting all these criteria. It is called a just money system. It is called just money because it privileges no one. And it is just money because no debt is involved. John Howell of the Athens, Ohio League of Women Voters created this graphic to show the basic difference between the existing system and a just money system. I've modified it slightly. In a just money system, money is created by government and circulates in the economy. Some is taken out in taxes, but respent into the economy to continue circulating. This money is a public asset. No debt is involved. On the other side, as it is today, money created by banks as debt credit is loaned into the economy. When the debt is repaid, the money is removed from circulation, though the banks keep up a steady increase in more and more money creating loans, which we've noted causes increasing overall debt. This is an extractive system, and interest payments are acquired from the general circulation and paid to the banks, who then use it for their expenses, with a significant net profit going to shareholders. Banks deserve a fee for intermediating between saver investors and borrowers, and in a just money system, they would receive fees and interest on existing money that they lend out. This is what many people believe happens today. But they would not be making money on the creation of the people's money supply, which produces a transfer of wealth. To summarize a just money system, we, the people, create additions to the money supply as a public asset with an act in law. Private commercial banks no longer have the privilege and power to create money. Money is created as an asset, entered as income, and a cash asset on the government's accounts at Treasury. No debt is involved. The first use of new money is for the common good. Government can equitably give some of the money as a universal dividend or income. Government can spend some into the economy, adding to the amounts already dedicated to healthcare, education, the transportation and communication networks, etc. Government can also lend some of the money to the private bankers in local communities to make more funds available for entrepreneurship and small business. Just money can be part of the solution instead of the source of many of the problems. The government makes this national money and guarantees its value. And just money created by we the people could be the fulcrum that makes change easier. While just money cannot fix all our problems, it can make fixing them possible. I wish I had time to take us on a few more trips in the time machine. This kind of money, just sovereign money, isn't new. It has a long history of successful implementation, in all but a few cases put to an end by a powerful financial elite. We could step back in time to the US colonies, to a couple periods in Canada's history, to the Revolutionary and Civil Wars in the US, to the Isle of Guernsey in 1815, or Wurgel, Germany in 1932. But it's back to our future. I hope each and every one of you will add a slice of your energy to bringing awareness to the power of the money system to either drag down or support our goals for a better world. Please explore all our options and speak up for change. We are here now, and all of us can feel the tension. The number and level of crises are increasing. History tells us some adjustment is on its way, no matter what we do. And we have an opportunity to facilitate change, to choose. This makes this a time of opportunity. Be prepared. As the debate picks up, there will be strong opposition from those vested in the current system and from many who simply do not know how money works or how important it is to every other concern. Many with deep pockets will be working to stay ahead of the movement for real change and a democratized money system. Naomi Klein, in her 2007 book, The Shock Doctrine, shows how some people and agencies have prepared in advance for crises, and sometimes even created them, so that they can sweep in with prepared changes that suit their own interests. This time, let's those of us dedicated to a better world that recognize the interconnection of all living systems and the importance of building in sustainability, regeneration, renewal, and a just and equitable economy. Let's us be the ones who are prepared. The conversation about changing the money system has been heating up over the last decade, with potential solutions abundant. There is a lot of dialogue and deliberation happening on possible alternatives to our present system at surprising levels of community and governance. Share what you know with the people with whom you work and live. Please add the importance of the money system to your conversations. Here's a bit of what's happening. None of these groups bear any responsibility for any errors in this presentation, but we'll start with your home group, Progressive Money Canada. They're a good place for you to begin for Canada-specific information. I joined a webinar last year given by the US Federal Reserve on their efforts to assure that our money system was ceasing to work against minority populations. It was an impressive and diverse group of presenters, and one heard a sincere effort happening at our Fed to rectify previous injustice. In mid-May 2022, the US Federal Reserve closed requested public comments on a study of central bank digital currency, which they're contemplating. They are responding to the very real threat of further privatization of the money system via cryptocurrencies. A few years ago, Harvard Law established an entity studying, quote, democratizing money, justmoney.org, providing a gathering place for scholars from all over the world for deep and detailed discussion. In the US, the American Monetary Institute and its founder, Stephen Zarlenga, were an early leader in bringing a discussion of the money system to the fore and in promoting a sovereign, just, democratized public money to Congress. The Alliance for Just Money is following in their footsteps with an emphasis on education and political action. The Alliance has an extraordinary biography of resource material sorted from the simple and clear to the down the rabbit hole esoteric. They also hold reading groups on professional papers and coffee houses on money topics. It's well worth a visit. Positive Money, an incredibly effective promoter and educator on the money system, branched out to Positive Money EU and in May 2022 to Positive Money US. It is now focused on pushing the existing system toward more spending on the common good, and it has a wealth of materials about the existing system and how it works. Ellen Brown and the Public Banking Institute has played a starring role in bringing awareness of the role of the banking system to the US public. Establishing public banks with the same money creation privileges that the commercial banks use can cut the costs for long-term public investments almost in half, freeing up billions to pay for prevention, crisis management, regeneration, and sustainable system installation. Public banks are an excellent next step, and while they will not stop the inexorable exponential growth curve that results from debt credit money, they can at least slow it and shift more funding toward the common good. And public banks can be an integral component of a just money system. Many of these organizations belong to the International Movement for Monetary Reform, which includes groups from 30 countries. I have two websites that have the contents of both my books available online, howwepay.us and usmoney.us. There are also a variety of other solutions that can be found with Google searches for local exchange trading systems, cryptocurrencies, no money or beyond money, the gift economy, and so on. Interesting options that we haven't time for today. To conclude, changing the money system will not fix our problems, but it will make fixing them possible. Leverage your work for a better world with advocacy for a just money system, however you decide to define it. We all have particular issues that are dearest to our hearts. I hope I've convinced you that the money system as it is today is an obstacle to your success in any field that requires public decision-making or public funding, or people with the free time and energy to dedicate themselves to the tasks at hand. Please add your voice for a money system that serves our goals for a better world. Thank you for joining me for this whirl through money and history. And now I'm ready for questions.
Well, thank you, Virginia. That's a lot of stuff to digest and possibilities of a lot more that we can just get to. I was going to ask you a question about what might wrap up the global monopoly game, but I will pass because we've had a whole bunch of people offering, coming up with questions. The first of which was Jeff Edgar. If you wanted to say Jeff, and Derek Paul's on deck. Are you there, Jeff?
Hi, yeah, can you hear me?
Yep. Can't see you,
Um,
but
It seems like you've got the visuals muted.
anyways, you can ask your question. That'll work.
Okay. I actually didn't have a question because I agree with everything that Virginia said. So, but my name is Jeff Eater for, the people here. Oh, it looks like I can start my video. Okay. Yeah, so I'm one of the co-founders of Progressive Money Canada. And if anybody's actually interested in pursuing knowledge or interest in the idea, a first step is just actually to go to the home page. And there's two videos. One starts with the transition and actually goes to one of the questions that someone asked where they asked about, does there need to be a constitutional change in the United States? And there may be, but in Canada, it could be done with almost within the existing system, at least the transition, and then to a more complete monetary reform that follows. But anyway, it's kind of set out very plainly in two videos on the home page. In about 40 minutes or so, you'd get the total concept of what Progressive Money Canada is proposing. So anyways, I want to thank you, Virginia, for bringing it to these fine people. And of course, I didn't really have a question, so I'm just agreeing with Virginia and hoping that it piques the interest of the people here. Thank you.
Good to hear there's a Canadian equivalent coming up. I've met a few people, so we'll hopefully get in touch. If you could put your web link in the chat, then we would have that available.
Already done.
Okay, Derek and Paul Beckwith on deck.
Mute and video. Okay. Thank you for a very stimulating talk. I think some parts of the what you're recommending can take place with the laws and everything as we have now. But I was worried by one of your questions and statements, and that is that you'd like to see the whole control go into the financial part of government. I would think this could be a disaster because any MP can be appointed Minister of Finance, whereas the person who gets the job of head of the Bank of Canada is usually very, very smart on these matters and knows the kind of things that you know. And so I would think that would be one thing that would be a lot of people would protest, people who are experts in money. But I do think that you mentioned climate change at one point. Facing up to climate change means, although a lot of people don't know it yet, that you have to increase, you have to spend money increasing organic farming faster than it is increasing, and you have to improve forest floors as well. And this kind of thing takes money and does not bring in any profit in the first few years. And I would think that a system, an understanding that loans would be entirely interest-free on that kind of project, a project that cannot bring profit for quite a long time, that would be a very good start and completely in keeping from what you said, with what you said. But I'd like to hear more on the details of, and did you consider, for example, limiting the total interest that can be paid on any loan? This is, there was a 19th century proposed system that brought in that aspect.
If I can go ahead and answer that.
Yeah, please do.
I think it's helpful to think of this as three separate issue areas. One is making a decision about how much new money can be introduced into the economy in a given year to keep the values steady. And that seems to me to be both a an issue that requires really, really smart people gathering lots and lots of data. And I would hope that it would also include sort of a crowd wisdom. I mean, maybe you stick on everybody's voting ballot or on their tax return what they think is going on with the value of the dollar and add that into the component. But anyway, you have a group, a steady money agency that is going to determine how much new money can be entered. And then the second piece is for Congress to say, okay, we accept that recommendation. There's an act of Congress that creates that money and sticks it in the government's bank account. Then the third piece is that, I mean, we're striving for a democracy where as much as possible decisions are made collaboratively. And in our system, Congress makes those decisions. So Congress is going to decide where that new money goes to begin with. Now, in the act that creates this new money system, which is perfectly constitutional, the Article 1, Section 8 gives the US government the power to coin or create the money supply. But in the act that changes our system from the Federal Reserve System to a just money system, the act itself could specify proportional issuance of that new money. I mean, the act, for instance, might say, well, 30% of it is going to go as direct dividends to every citizen. A third of it's going to go to states, and then a third of it is going to be decided on how that money is used at the federal level. But when you're talking about whether loans the government does make have or do not have interest, that really is a political decision. You know, as much as we'd like them to do it the way we'd like them to do it, which is with minimal interest for public purposes.
Thank you.
Okay, Paul Beckwith, John Mayer on deck.
Yeah, hi, thank you. Very interesting talk, Virginia, and very thought-provoking. So can you comment in the idea, or in a just money world, do you think carbon taxes or fee and dividend is the best way to go to address climate change? And also, what about there was a couple other questions I had. What about you know, the oil prices and fossil fuel industry profits and stuff? Like, how does that come into you know, what you're talking about? Because, you know, the people that obviously there'll be a lot of pushback from the people that are benefiting from the existing system to stop these changes, you know, any changes to a just money system. But inevitably that system's not sustainable and will collapse and lead to, you know, huge recession, et cetera. So can you comment a bit more on that? I mean, I think climate change, the crisis that is most urgent that will come out of climate change is food price spikes and lack of global food supply and you know, huge problems with famine and that sort of thing, you know, very soon, like within the next decade. So any thoughts?
Well, amongst you guys, you have far more knowledge than I do about what the best choices are in terms of making a significant difference on climate change. I'm not an expert in that. But what I do know is that in our current money system, because it's profit driven, that's the highest priority, is at the banks, if they're choosing who to lend money to, who to create money for, they're going to choose people with an existing record. So they need to make profits. So they're not going to choose to loan money to an innovative entrepreneurial idea that has no, you know, it hasn't been tested. They're going to give money to the oil industry because they know they'll get their return, they'll make their money. What just money would do, the government could basically spend as much money as needed, as long as there are people and resources to do the work that needs to be done. That would be the only limiting factor. I mean, there's no point in creating, $10 trillion for renewable energy if you don't have anybody who can create it and you don't have the resources needed for it. But as long as you have the people and you have the resources, then with just money, you could create as much money as needed to get those tasks done. And you wouldn't need to charge interest.
Okay, John and Bill Tyson on deck.
Yeah, Virginia, this is extremely useful. I think most of us deal with the biophysical world and we don't really understand the financial world. And we don't understand why the very simple and clear prescriptions we have for dealing with the various crises we're facing aren't taken up by government and media. To me, the financial system is a clerical function. It's a technical function, and it's a wealth creation enabler. It isn't really something that generates wealth, but efficient transfer of funds allows people to do the work that they need to do. I created the website years ago called theperfectcurrency.org, which deals with a lot of these issues and what a perfect currency would look like. But I guess I don't support the idea that you should design a money system based on the problems you want to fix. I think it should be a purely technical exercise, a supporting exercise to whatever decisions a society wants to make. And you shouldn't skew the money system to do the work you want it to do. You want to do any more than the powerful should be able to control it to line their own pockets. So along that line, to turn it back into something neutral and with potential for change, useful change, how do we take control of the money system back if they're the most powerful people in the country who are the biggest political donors and who also own the media? How do you, any ideas on how we actually execute change?
Well, just that I think we have to begin by informing absolutely everybody we know. Yes, those are really giant obstacles, and we're heading into a strong wind of resistance. But people have made changes. We've made dramatic changes over the past years, and we just all need to spread the word. That's where you can start, making sure that everyone understands how important the money system is to everything else, and helping them understand just at that really basic level. And then contact your congressman, give your congressman some of these materials. Suggest the Alliance for Just Money is working on an American Monetary Reform Act. It was presented by Dennis Kucinich in 2011 in Congress, but then it didn't get out of committee, actually. And the Alliance is working on a revision of that, bringing it up to date. And then we're hoping that we can, all of us, make an appointment with our congressman and sit down with them and let them know it's important to us. And no congressman is going to do anything unless a lot of people in their communities contact them. At How We Pay, I had started a campaign to get people to send postcards to everybody, but then COVID hit, and I was fine.
Okay, well, thanks. Yeah, I think the material you've put up here would, and it will go on the web, on the YouTube channel. I think that'll be extremely useful for a lot of people. So thanks very much.
Good, thank you.
Okay, Bill Tyson, followed by Jeff Eider again.
Yeah, hello. Thanks very much, Virginia, for that very entertaining presentation. I have a simple question related to the fact that money is so simple and yet so complicated. Do you have anything in the States that's equivalent to our Bank of Canada? The Bank of Canada controls or tries to control inflation rates, money supply, and so on. You've mentioned the Fed system in the US. Is that in any way equivalent to the Bank of Canada?
Yes, the Bank of Canada is your central bank, and it is owned by the government. In the United States, our central bank is the Federal Reserve System, which is actually 12 banks. And they are private, and the central Fed is owned by its members. So in the United States, the central bank, and someone in the Alliance group made a great chart. If you went back 100 years ago, almost all of the central banks in the world were privately owned. And then over the last century, I mean, if you were looking at a chart, it kind of goes like this. Over the last century, most of the central banks in the world have become publicly owned. Now, today, the US is way down there at the bottom with, I think, maybe 4 or 5 other countries who still have privately owned central banks. But anyway, did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, Jeff, and then OH165478. Be nice to know your name, but there you go. You're on deck. Jeff.
Yeah, no, I just want to kind of address what Bill's just said, and also the other fella, Derek Paul. In Canada, the Bank of Canada does indirectly affect the money supply, but it has very little sway until the pandemic started. And then that's when they started to pump billions of dollars into the banking sector. But normally all the Bank of Canada does is it sets the policy rate, which is the overnight rate. And that is basically the benchmark for all other interest rates. For example, your mortgage or a personal loan, something like that. And of course, it's crunch time for a lot of people in Canada as their fixed mortgages come up for renewal. It looks like, I mean, if en masse people are going to be having big problems and housing prices will probably start to fall when that happens because people will be forced into bankruptcy. So the Bank of Canada does, that's basically the only power it has to affect inflation too. And again, it's almost a misconceived idea to raise the interest rate because the real causes of inflation that we had are really the result of energy prices and supply chain disruptions. So what the Bank of Canada is largely responsible for inflation-wise is asset inflation. So any of you that are property owners like myself, you'll see that your property values over the last year went up by anywhere from 20 to 30%. And that's largely the result of the billions of dollars that the bank pumped into the private commercial banking sector. Of course, what do they do with their money? They speculate. And of course, they put it into real estate. And over the last year, it was like 20% of all the property sales were bought by equity companies, like private investment firms. So those were the main drivers of inflation, not the actual CERB benefits that were created to help people. But of course, you've got, Andrew Scheer and stuff. He made this big stunt in Parliament where he stood in front and wanted to audit the Bank of Canada. And if any of you are familiar with the Bank of Canada, it's the most transparent financial institution in all of Canada. But anyways, he just put his hand and blamed all the inflation on the Bank of Canada because it's kind of a right-wing thing. Anytime you spend money for the good of the people, it's a problem. Anyways, I can rattle on some more, but I'll leave it at that.
Okay, I think the person whose number I spelled out has changed the name, but I didn't catch the change. Are you still there? Howard Schweitzer will be next, but if that other person is about, that would be great to hear from you. We can always go back to you if you show up, Howard. And Andrew Welch is on deck.
Hi, well, Thank you, Virginia. That was a great presentation. Sweeping, always colorful as usual. I had one small addition that I would make and kind of a question about that. You did a great job of showing how, money is power and everything, but I thought there was a point near the beginning where you were talking about money, the aspects of money as a medium of exchange. As Aristotle pointed out, there's two roles that money plays. One is that medium of exchange. The other is an instrument of power. And of course, it is the store of value that creates that instrument of power, because when you can accumulate a large amount of money, you can manipulate the market. So I thought that was one thing you might just point that out to people so that they have that in their mind as they carry through and they see how power is exerted through money. And another point, I wanted to speak to something John Mayer said, or John Mayer, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but he said something about that just money should be just a technical fix and that it shouldn't be, directed at any particular issue or anything. And I wanted to note that it is exactly that. It is just a technical fix. We have three components to that fix, as Virginia pointed out. And so that's the technical fix. Now, the spending, of course, is up to Congress. And but what this does is reconnects the money to the politics so that the people, when they elect somebody to do something, they will have the actual power to do it with the money. See, we need a government that can do it. Right now, banks are controlling the government, so the people don't have a voice. Money will give them a voice, public money. Thank you.
Thank you, Howard. Andrew, you're on, and Jeff has another comment after that.
Yeah, hi, thank you, Virginia. I'm afraid I don't, unfortunately, share your optimism for society making the right choice, or even if they did, for them being allowed to implement that choice. I'm personally, for my money, so to speak, I'm a fan of demurrage currencies and negative interest rates, which are amazingly in vogue among several central banks around the globe right now. I think that money only has value because we believe it has value, and working on the assumption that the current system has to collapse before just money can be put into an effect. And indeed, your graphs seem to indicate that collapse is probably imminent, and that it can happen if our belief changes. You talked about preparing for such an event when you talked about the shock doctrine and so on. What do you see as key elements of that preparation?
Well, certainly having a law, an act that could quickly be circulated and that has already been introduced as well as possible to as many members of Congress as we can get to is a very important piece of that. And then having as many people as we can aware of how important it is to make that change, who are contacting their congressman. And I'm really on, I really did like Thomas Homer Dixon's book, The Commanding Hope. I think he makes a really good point. And yes, I'm 100% with you on really being discouraged. And I look at those graphs and there's no question, we are heading off a cliff right now. Even in the last week, the signs of that are, like the popcorn popper, we are on the brink. And I loved his attitude that we have to both be very realistic and we have to hold a space for something we don't know now, but that's gonna come and help us move through this in a constructive way. I mean, I have to do that for me personally. A friend said I'm one of the most cynical people she knows and one of the most optimistic. So I'm holding those two aspects simultaneously. And my only comment on demurrage, I really don't, I like money as a totally neutral factor. And when you have a demurrage money, for those of you, that means basically, it's like if you keep your ship in dock, you have to pay every day for it to sit there. So demurrage is when a fee is attached to holding on to money. The value goes down, and that's intended, and it works to make you spend it faster. But I just don't like the idea of using money as a manipulative tool. I want it to be neutral. And I don't want to, if somebody wants to hang on to their $100 for the next 100 years, I think they should be able to do that and not discover that it's worth nothing.
Well, just to comment briefly on that, I recognize your point about demurrage currency doing that, but to my mind, what it means, that's not the major purpose of introducing that system. The major purpose is to make money truly the equivalent of what you're buying. So everything we buy with money degrades in value. That's the law of thermodynamics. Entropy, it means it goes down. So it removes the impetus to turn natural assets into money where the value goes up, and that the money is then a just representation because the money goes down in value the same way that the goods you bought goes down in value.
Yeah, I do understand that point. And I did comment on, I mean, I really do. I lost one slide. I had one glitch in the whole thing, which was the second slide about, I really think it's much more useful to think about language as money, as a kind of language. Yeah. So, in the same way that we store all kinds of stuff in books, and then 20 years from now, someone can read that. Money is simply a useful tool, and it doesn't have, in the same way that language doesn't deteriorate according to the laws of thermodynamics, money shouldn't deteriorate according to the laws of thermodynamics. They're very similar kinds of tools. And the idea that money needs to connect to the real, tangible world, it adds to confusion, not to clarity.
Okay, thank you.
Jean Doty has a question. I know Jeff has, I think, just one more comment. If it's quick, we can do that, but we're close to the end of the time here. So is it a quick comment, Jeff?
Well, go ahead with Jean first.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're good. Jean.
Okay, mine was just a comment addressing a question that was put on the chat, basically saying that the Canadian government no longer sells Canada savings bonds. They stopped selling them in 2017, and any bond that anybody was holding no longer collects any interest as they all matured in 2021. Just so you know.
Interesting.
Interesting.
That was all I had to say. That was it.
Okay, thank you. Jeff, last word.
So this, I've heard a couple of people comment on, the trust in government to make decisions to allocate money in the proper places. So I think this is probably the weakest link in monetary reform going into the future is, how do you select those people, and, what kind of mandate would they work under? And when you start to get into it, it's a very complex situation. So how do you keep money influencing out of people that are in those positions that will be making those decisions? It's very difficult. And part of the NEED Act, which is what Virginia is advocating under all this, they have what's called a national, well, not that, but something like the National Investment Authority, which is a paper done by Amarova. But in Canada, we're proposing a Monetary Oversight Management Committee. I use that acronym on purpose, by the way, because it's nice and soft, MUM, as opposed to Big Brother. But that is something that's difficult, and we're actually working on that right now, is to actually give something concrete how this would be structured, and it would be parallel to the Board of Governors at the Bank of Canada, because they're the ones who make these decisions, but there would have to be more input, and of course it'd have to be more transparent. And that's all I have to say about that.
Okay, now Lucille just asked, why did the government of Canada stop doing bonds and paying interest? Do you know?
All I've got is the Wikipedia website on it, and it basically it was starting to cost the government more money than it was making on them, and the popularity of them fell dramatically over the intervening sort of 10, 15 years from the late 90s into the 2000s. So it just became untenable.
I just step in for a second?
Okay.
Bond sales are still sold every single day in financial markets. For example, they had a provincial bond market where they bought up a bunch of provincial bonds, the Bank of Canada. So they still exist, but they exist at a higher level.
It's also the Canada Savings Bond Program was for individuals, and the kinds of bonds that you're talking about are like the bond market that they have. So they're completely different.
Correct.
Yeah, different things. So yes.
Okay, well, that pretty well wraps up. This has been fascinating. People can stick around afterwards to have an informal chat. But Jean, you wanted to thank the speaker?
I will do that. Thank you very much. Virginia, it is really my pleasure and privilege to thank you on behalf of the Canadian Association for the Club of Rome for this fascinating discussion that you led today. As a scientist, the information that you presented today was something that I've never really thought about. So I'm very glad that this has been recorded so I can go back and look at it again, because this is really something that I have to twist my head around. So again, thank you very, very much for a wonderful presentation. And I really thank you for that. And I would also like to say, for those of you who are not members of the Canadian Association of the Club of Rome, you are very welcome to come to our website, canadiancore.com. And there you will see links to what we refer to as Stay Informed. And if you sign up for that, you will get mailouts with all of the new information that has come out on the website in the last while, including the link to this particular talk, so that you can go back to it again. You also will have the opportunity to look at our memberships if you're interested in that, and what we stand for as an organization. So I'd strongly encourage anybody who's new to this forum to check canadiancore.com and look at this particular presentation, as well as all the other ones that we've had. We've had over 100 of them since the beginning of the pandemic, and they are fascinating talks. So again, Virginia, thank you very much for including your talk into this group of wonderful things. Thank you.
My pleasure. I had fun.
Good.